Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you've ever seen Spider-Man 2, you absolutely know the scene. Peter Parker is standing at the front of a runaway train full of passengers. To stop it from derailing, he fires webs at the surrounding buildings, grabs on, and just holds on for dear life. The webs stretch to the absolute limit, some snap, but ultimately they decelerate the train and save everyone. Now, it sounds like pure, impossible comic book fantasy, right? Well, today we're actually going to unpack the very real, honestly mind-bending material science behind spider silk. We're going to see if a biological thread could actually pull off those kinds of superhero feats in the real world.
So, to kick things off, let's ask the ultimate question. Can a biological thread really outcompete industrial metals? You hear this claim all the time, right? The spider silk is stronger than steel, tougher than Kevlar. But separating the urban legend from the actual mechanics means we have to look really closely at what spiders are actually spinning.
All right, let's dive into this. When we think of spider webs, we usually just assume they're made of one uniform material. But actually, spiders produce 7 totally different types of silk. And the absolute powerhouse of the group is dragline silk, also known as major ampullatus silk. This is the structural foundation of the web, basically the heavy-duty spokes of the wagon wheel. It's specifically engineered for a high-impact job, stopping a heavy, fast-flying bug dead in its tracks.
To pull that off, this dragline silk has to be remarkably strong. But what does that mean at a macro scale? Let's scale it way up. If you had a rope made entirely of this dragline silk, with a cross-section of just 1 square centimeter, so roughly the thickness of your little finger, it could support about 60,000 newtons of force. To put that into perspective, that is the exact weight of a fully grown African elephant, literally hanging from a rope the thickness of your finger. Now, we have to be totally fair when comparing this to steel, which brings us to the concept of specific strength. Experimental ultra-high-strength steel actually does have a higher absolute breaking point than typical dragline silk. But here's the catch. Steel is about 6 times denser. So if you take 2 ropes of the exact same mass and length, one silk, one steel, the silk rope is going to be much thicker because it's just so incredibly lightweight. Because of that, the silk rope can actually withstand roughly twice the force of the steel rope before snapping. Ounce for ounce, spider silk takes the crown.
But hey, pure strength isn't everything. Imagine if a web was super stiff, like a brick wall. If a flying bug, let's call it our tennis ball in this analogy, hits that brick wall, it doesn't get caught at all. It just bounces right off. If a spider wants to actually eat, it needs to slowly decelerate that insect so the web has time to stick to it. And this brings us to another really critical metric in material science.
This is where spider silk just completely wipes the floor with the competition. We're looking at toughness, which is a material's ability to absorb kinetic energy by stretching before it breaks. Kevlar, the stuff used in bulletproof vests, is incredibly strong but stiff, absorbing about 50 megajoules per cubic meter. High-strength steel hits about 170. But then you look at the silk from the Darwin's bark spider. This is a species in Madagascar that spins these massive 25-meter webs over raging rivers. Its silk reaches a staggering 520 megajoules per cubic meter. It's literally over 10 times tougher than Kevlar and 3 times tougher than the absolute strongest steel.
Section 1. Microscopic machinery inside the spidrons.
So how does this incredible toughness build at the microscopic level? The secret to this unbelievable natural strength and extreme stretchiness doesn't come from a factory furnace. It comes from microscopic spider silk proteins called spidroins. And the crucial point here is this brilliant dual structure. Inside the silk fiber, these spidroins arrange themselves in 2 different ways. First, you've got nanocrystals. This is where the proteins are tightly packed and highly ordered, stacking together like rigid egg trays to give it massive structural strength. But connecting those blocks are the amorphous regions, where the spidrons are loose and completely disorganized, basically acting like tiny elastic cords. So when the silk is pulled, those elastic cords stretch way out to absorb massive amounts of energy, while the rigid egg trays anchor the whole network together so it doesn't snap.
But how in the world does a spider actually manufacture this? It basically acts as a highly advanced biological assembly line, perfectly executing a 4-step process right at room temperature. First, in the silk gland's tail, proteins pair up but they stay loose. Next, they move into a storage sac where the spider perfectly tunes the pH and salt levels. This makes the proteins repel each other and form tiny structures called micelles, which keeps everything liquid. Then, in the spinning duct, the pH drops even further, neutralizing their negative charge, while mechanical shear forces physically stretch them out. Finally, in the drawdown taper, the spider pulls the liquid through a tiny spigot. That final, rapid stretch forces hydrogen bonds to lock into place, stitching all those rigid nanocrystals together. It's just an absolute masterpiece of green chemistry.
Section 2. The manufacturing bottleneck.
Now this brings up a really frustrating reality. If this material is stronger than steel, tougher than Kevlar, incredibly lightweight, and made without any toxic chemicals, why on earth aren't we using it everywhere? Why aren't our clothes, our parachutes, and our medical sutures all made of spider silk right now? Well, we've actually been trying to mass-produce this stuff for centuries. Back in 1709, a Frenchman literally boiled spider egg sacs to make stockings. By the 2000s, it took a team in Madagascar years to extract silk by hand from over 1 million wild spiders just to weave one single golden cape. You might be thinking, why not just build a spider farm? Well, spiders are highly territorial cannibals. You put 10,000 of them in a room and you're just going to end up with one very fat spider. So scientists tried lab attempts. They put spider genes into E. coli, yeast, plants, and incredibly, even into goats to try and extract silk proteins from their milk. But all of these methods just produced powders and gels, not actually usable fibers, mostly because they couldn't mimic the spider's complex spinning duct.
Section 3. Hacking the silkworm.
The solution to this bottleneck is pure genius. If we can't farm spiders, and we can't spin the liquid proteins perfectly in a lab, we just need to bypass the spider entirely. We need to use an animal that already has a spinning duct, and one that humans have been successfully farming for, 5 millennia, the silkworm. To get a silkworm to spin spider silk, biotech companies inject spider DNA directly into silkworm eggs. And to make the DNA stick, they use a tool called piggyback. Piggyback is a transposon, or a natural jumping gene originally found in the cabbage looper moth. It acts exactly like a biological cut-and-paste system. Scientists swap the middle of the piggyback sequence with the spider silk gene, and when it's injected, the enzyme cuts open the silkworm's DNA and just pastes the spider instructions right in.
But there's a pretty hilarious roadblock to this method, perfectly summarized by one of the researchers who said, if I create the world's best recipe for chocolate chip cookies and I stick it in the pasta section, you're not going to make a lot of chocolate chip cookies. Here's the issue. Piggyback only looks for a tiny 4-letter genetic sequence to make its cut. Because that super short sequence appears all over the genome, Piggyback parks the spider gene completely randomly. The recipe ends up in the wrong section of the cookbook. Because of this, the silkworms end up producing silk that only contains about 6% to 10% spider DNA. Now, even at 10%, it's still incredibly strong, but it's just not the pure product we're looking for.
To solve this random parking problem, scientists are upgrading to CRISPR-Cas9. This is a total game changer. While Piggyback matches just 4 genetic letters, the CRISPR guide matches 20 exact letters. This acts as a highly targeted search and replace tool. It basically allows scientists to completely knock out the silkworm's native silk genes and precisely insert the spider silk gene directly into the silk gland's native code. This breakthrough is finally paving the way for pure, transgenic spider silk production on a massive industrial scale.
Section 4. The ultimate swing test.
So after years and years of biotech engineering, 1/2 ton of transgenic spider silk cocoons were harvested and spun together to create a massive continuous rope. It was finally time to put the Spider-Man hypothesis to an actual physical test. During a real-world swing test at an indoor climbing gym, a researcher strapped into a harness and just dropped from a platform suspended entirely by this transgenic spider silk rope. And the result? The rope spectacularly held the human's weight. It safely decelerated the fall, proving the staggering math and material science completely correct.
However, real-world application comes with a pretty painful caveat. The tensile strength was a massive success, sure, but it revealed something researchers call the blade effect. The very properties that make spider silk a miracle material, its extreme, unforgiving strength combined with how unbelievably thin it is, literally turned the rope into a razor wire. Under the immense force of the human drop, those tightly packed threads instantly sliced into the tester's fingers. So it turns out, catching a train with this stuff might actually save the passengers, but it would do absolute catastrophic damage to Peter Parker's hands.
The fact that we can now harvest the web of a cannibalistic jungle spider by reprogramming the genetic code of a 5,000-year-old farmed moth is absolutely breathtaking. Think about it. We've unlocked a material that can catch elephants, stop bullets, and even repair human nerves. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. As our mastery of CRISPR and bioengineering continues to accelerate, what impossible materials are we going to hack next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity spinning.